Hey there, it's so nice to see you here. Painting with watercolors can not only be fun, but it can also create a great opportunity for you to create unique presents that you can gift to your friends or your family. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint a northern light, a landscape that you can then turn into several unique watercolor bookmarks. If you're completely new to watercolor painting and need to know what you need and where to start, check out my guide on watercolor painting for beginners. You can find the link in the description box down below. For this tutorial, I'm going to use the Van Gogh watercolor pocket set and cold pressed watercolor paper by Arch. I already taped down the paper using washi tape to prevent the paper from buckling during the process. Started by applying a thin layer of water all over the paper for the wet and wet technique. You know you have just enough water on the paper if you only see a gloss or shine. You don't want to see any pools of water gathering around. So if you do, soak it up with a paper towel or a damp brush. Here I was using a flat wash brush to distribute the water. I usually use my round brush for that, but since I want to cover a bigger area, I use this wash brush instead. Once you have applied a thin layer of water, load up your round brush with a light yellow color. Because this watercolor set is rather opaque and thick, I diluted the paint with a little bit of water. Then I went ahead and started outlining wavy lines for the northern lights while leaving out the bottom part for now. Here we're going to create the reflection in the water later. So now we basically create the sky and then we add water below it. Also with watercolors, you usually start with one layer first and then build up the painting one layer at a time. That's why having good quality watercolor paper that can survive and handle all these steps is key. Now, since I used the bright yellow color, I'm using this cool blue color so I can create a bright green mixture. Again, I dilute the paint with water and then I went ahead and applied the paint to the white areas around the yellow lines. And then you want to slightly blend the blue into the yellow color. Now when I go over the yellow color, I immediately create a nice transition from yellow to green to blue. While everything is still wet, you want to keep building up the painting using the same colors. Now because the watercolors I'm using here are creamy and easy to activate, I could easily add more and more yellow and blue to the same areas and blend them slightly together. This set is usually not my go-to watercolor set because it's rather opaque and feels a little chalky compared to my beloved Schmincke or Daniel Smith watercolors that I always recommend, but I think it's still great for certain projects where you just want to blend colors together using the wet and wet technique. The key here is to remember that it's okay if it looks messy. As you can see here, I basically create these wavy lines and it still looks like nothing. Sometimes beginners start a painting and then get discouraged during the painting process and quit their painting just because it looks weird. But the reason why it looks weird is oftentimes because it's not ready at all. It's not like you go from white paper to a masterpiece immediately. It takes time and a lot of weird looking stages. So keep this in mind the next time you feel like quitting on your painting. Just keep painting and eventually it will all come together. Alright, so before I let everything dry, I also applied a layer of yellow watercolor paint to the bottom of the painting. So this is how everything looks so far. Now remember, you can also use a hairdryer to speed up the drying process. So if you're impatient when it comes to watercolor painting, this is your solution. Alright, as you can see, the watercolors look a lot lighter when dry, so now we want to build up the intensity and the darkness of the whole painting. So once everything is completely dry, apply another thin layer of water on top. The key here is to make sure that the paint is completely dry and that you gently brush over the paper. If the paint is still slightly wet, even just a little bit, you will easily reactivate everything. And then you want to repeat the steps. So load up your brush with the same colors you just used and then add them on top of each other to intensify them. Since now we have the base, yellow, green, and blue, it's time to add another color transition. So this time I mixed a purple color and applied it on top of the blue color. So we want to create a transition between blue to purple as the colors in the sky are getting darker and darker. To create purple, I used warm blue and cool red colored paint. To make everything even darker, I also added black watercolor paint on top. So you want to create a transition between yellow, green, blue, purple, and then black as your final darkest color. Again, don't forget that it might look weird, just keep going. As long as you keep the contrast between light and dark colors, your painting should be fine. If you notice you use too much water or paint, just lift it off with a paper towel or a clean damp brush. Since we have already created the base for the water, you now want to add the reflection of the dark sky on top. So here I simply brushed over the paper using dark watercolor paint, moving from left to right, back and forth, while leaving out some areas to keep the yellow color. And then I added more yellow paint on top. Then let everything completely dry and then we can build up the painting even more. Again, I first applied a thin layer of water because it's way easier to make everything blend into each other seamlessly. And then I added the same colors on top to create a bigger contrast between light and dark. You really want to make sure that you keep the yellow, green, and light blue colors alive while adding the darker colors around it. Once you're happy with the intensity of the colors, let everything completely dry. Alright, now it's time to add some of the final touch-ups. Now the painting still looks rather messy, but don't worry, everything will come together soon. So now we're going to use the glazing technique. So you want to create a light layer of purple or blue colored paint, and then add it to the horizon right below the northern lights to create the silhouette of the mountains in the background. And while the layer is still wet, load up your brush with dark blue paint and then apply it along the lower edge of the mountains so it blends towards the sky into the mountains to create shadows. And then load up your brush with the same color and apply the paint the same way as earlier to create the water reflections. So here I lightly brushed over the paper and used its texture to create these little reflections while leaving out some lighter areas for the water reflection. Go from left to right and then add additional lines right in the center of the water just to add variety. It doesn't have to look perfect. Now when everything is completely dry, apply a thin layer of water on top of the mountain area we just painted. And then load up your brush with black paint and start adding these small little black outlines of trees. They don't have to be super realistic as they will just blend into the background to add more depth to the painting. And then let everything completely dry. Now we just need to add the stars to the sky as the final details in the painting. For the stars, I used white gouache that I diluted with a little bit of water. And then I used my bristle brush to load it up with paint and to sprinkle the stars all over the painting. And now it's time to let everything dry and remove the tape. Now we just need to cut the painting into equal parts to create the bookmarks. And I don't know about you, but I find the painting looks even better this way, don't you think? This is optional, but if you want, you can also create round edges instead. I got this puncher on Amazon and you can adjust the size of the round edges. Here I chose the setting M and punched every corner of every bookmark. I think this makes the bookmarks look even more put together while still having this handmade feel to it. And to seal everything to protect the painting and the books, I used this spray by Schmincke that is made especially for watercolors. So you just simply spray it on top of the painting and let it dry. If you want, you can also punch a hole through the top of the bookmarks and add a ribbon to make them look even more special. And there you have it. I really hope you liked this video and found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day and I will see you in my next video. Bye!